Okay, we're going to get started now. Thank you all for coming. My name is Carl Arrow. I'm chair of this Legislative Redistricting Advisory Commission. Take a quick second to introduce the members. To my immediate right is Senate President Bill Ferguson. To his right is Senate President Pro Tem Melanie Griffith. And we have somebody sitting in, Senator West, Chris West from Baltimore County, I believe, right? To my left is the Speaker of the House, Adrienne Jones. And to her left is Majority Leader Eric Ludke from Montgomery County. I just wanted to say a couple of things. We're going to do a quick little briefing with respect to the data as it affects Western Maryland, but also just a couple of quick general statements about redistricting. First of all, you all have to understand, if you don't already know, it is essential, but it's extremely complicated. The primary objective really is to get one person, one vote, and provide voters the opportunity to vote for candidates of their choice. And what complicates things is that population generally increases, but it doesn't increase evenly. Some areas gain, some areas lose. And it's really not a matter of how much you gain or how much you lose, but it's a matter of how that happens in respect with everybody else. So a small loss or a small gain might not mean very much, but depending on what happens nearby, it could mean quite a bit. There are obviously legal and constitutional criteria to be dealt with when drawing districts. Often they conflict with each other and are somewhat different with respect to legislative and congressional districts. The diversity of Maryland's population and its geography, both physical and political, are factors adding to the complexity of this task, and it becomes necessary to work our way in from the edges when building districts so that we don't have something left over and then have a backwash, so to speak. The Maryland General Assembly does have a constitutional responsibility to act in legislative and congressional redistricting, and this commission was established to receive public input and develop plans for both legislative and congressional districts. We're here to listen. We welcome your testimony. We have several ways of receiving that, and I'll talk about that at the end of the meeting in case you want to send something in later. So with that, let me just go over a couple of things with the way the numbers came out with respect to Western Maryland. First of all, Maryland's adjusted population is 6,175,403. And legislatively, this is a very manageable number with respect to substantially equal population in legislative districts. However, congressionally, it means since we have to get as close to zero variance as is possible, we're going to have a district that has at least a variance of 1, since 8 doesn't divide evenly into that population. The ideal congressional district is going to be 771,925 people. When I first got involved in this many years ago as a legislative nonpartisan staffer, I think the congressional districts were just somewhere around 500,000 people. So it shows you what happens when growth. A senatorial district, and there are 47 of them in the state, will now be 131,391. I think this is about 4,000 more than last time, which I seem to recall was somewhere around 127,000 people. A 2-member delegate district will ideally be at 87,594, and a single-member district at 43,797. Keep in mind that unlike the congressional districts, legislative districts, the definition of substantially equal population allows for greater leeway in terms of meeting that one person, one vote standard. Generally, we talk about plus or minus 5%. But bottom line is the plan should come in with no more than a maximum deviation of 10%. It should be under 10%. All right, now state growth by county. You can't see this map, but basically it's no surprise that the central area of the state really increased in population, although, interestingly enough, Frederick County grew by 16.4% in 10 years. It's a tremendous growth. Howard County grew 15.8, Montgomery 9.3, Prince George's 12%, Anne Arundel 9.4. Charles County in the south 13.7. I point those out to you because Garrett County actually lost population to the tune of 4.3%, Allegheny lost almost a little over 9%, so it had a 9.3% loss. Washington County grew by just under 5%, and of course Frederick. So this is going to have ramifications for how you're going to be able to build these districts. And what it basically says in some respects is that things are going out here are going to have to move to the east. Oh, whoops. So Maryland's Western Districts 1 and 2, 1 is extremely underpopulated, 2 and 5 are close to the ideal, and 4 exceeds the ideal population by more than 5%, let's say. So that's something that's going to have to be dealt with. So you can think about it in terms of, if you look at a region or an area, you can think about how many legislative districts can fit in an area. It's another way of thinking about it. And would Allegheny, Garrett, and Washington County, how would that work? Well, in 2010, the population there adjusted was 245,249, which basically the number of ideal districts would be 2. In 2020, the adjusted population was 245,215, so slightly smaller, and that works out, if you're doing the math, to 1.86 districts. Again, you can probably accommodate this within the allowable variances, but it's going to take some moving of the lines. It's just no escaping that. Okay, so this is the type of stuff. So one more thing, so the ripple effect, okay? Senate District 1 shrunk by half, and it's going to have to move further east into Washington County. The region as a whole, it's got to shift a little to the east or southeast to create districts with required population numbers. And the growth patterns will require shared districts or districts that are going to cross county lines. There's no other way to meet that population standard without having that occur. I'd also like to point out that normally I don't do this presentation. This is done by one of the nonpartisan staffers who couldn't be here today, and it was a role that I certainly played 4 times before this new role that I have now. I would just want to point out that the legislative staff is incredibly dedicated, work in a nonpartisan fashion. It's like a religion to us down in Annapolis. When you come in the door and ask for a map, if you're a member or a member of the public, we don't ask what party you are, we just do it for you. And what you want is what you get. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions with respect to that overview. If there are, I'm happy to try to take them and answer them. If not, we're going to start listening. So I'm going to call Delegate Mike McKay first, since this is his home turf.
Well, first and foremost, welcome to District 1, Allegheny County. I just live a couple of miles away. If you get tired, we'll put you up in one of the other kids' bedrooms. You all know that I got 8 kids. We got a couple away at college. We can always take care of more. So I basically have two comments. Madam Speaker, Mr. President, we know that you will do the best for all of Marylanders, and I want to thank you for doing that as this commission gets put together. But to the rest of the committee, when it comes to congressional, I just ask that you put groups together. And the example that I would like to come up with is Frederick City should be in Frederick County when it comes to congressional districts and all that, how that all works out together. I think that like communities should be together as much as possible, knowing and understanding the undaunting task that you have to try to make everything equal and stay within the spirit of one person, one vote. And I know that it's tough. As for senatorial districts, District 1, I believe, is the largest geographical from one end to the other. Senator Edwards has ice skates or roller skates and can go from Friendsville all the way to Williamsport with no problem whatsoever. The reality is that is a large, large territory. And taking into consideration, if you would just, I know we have the plus or minus 5%. I think if you just started it out at 5% less, how that ends up going above Hagerstown or halfway, it's 1/2 dozen the difference. The reality is that we need to figure out keeping the geographical, because it's very hard for two communities that are separated by basically 3 hours, 2 hours and 45 minutes. Now, if I'm driving, Senator Edwards says I get there in 2 hours and 25 minutes, but that's beside the point. But thank you very much for the consideration. I wish we had more people here, but I know that as it becomes more of a topic, we'll have more people participate. So thank you again, and welcome.
Thank you. I assume no questions from the panel. All right. Now, I think Senator Edwards is still there. All right.
Thank you very much. I'd take the long way around, just like in my senatorial district. Getting down here, this is blocked off. I want to welcome you to Senatorial District 1. I live about 30 miles west of here. Give you some idea of the district. District's about 100 miles long. And the difference between District 1 and the districts on the shore represent 3 or 4 counties. They're like this. This district's like this. That does make somewhat of a difference. I haven't really thoroughly looked at preliminary maps, but I'd like for you to, as you look at District 1, where things really start and go east, instead of going above Hagerstown to the Frederick County line, which makes it that much further, is you can go north. I think there's one district, or maybe 2, that goes up the Pennsylvania line, doesn't go past Hagerstown, and then you need to look south if you need to do that. I also would suggest, which I did the last time, that you look at the -5% for District 1. I think that's fair. These 2 counties here, Garrett and Allegheny, along with, I believe, the city and maybe Somerset, are the only counties that lost population. That's why I hope you all support some of the bills we're going to put in this year to help us increase our population out here. I do support single-member districts. We've had single-member districts out here, I think, ever since we did have a 2-member district in the 70s, I believe it was. Then we've had single-member districts ever since then. I think that's really the fair approach, because that way you got someone representing a smaller segment of that larger population. And that's what it's all about, allowing the people who are in office the opportunity to represent the people more thoroughly than when you're spread out. And when it comes to the federal congressional districts, the only thing I would say is I think our forefathers, when they set this up, they wanted these districts in what they call communities of interest, where you have sort of the same thought process, more or less, of people who live in those districts. Of course, I guess sometimes it doesn't matter, because in our district, the congressperson hasn't lived in the district, the last 2. So I'm not sure if you live in Western Maryland, you probably run for Congress on the Eastern Shore. I don't know how that would work. But I just throw that out. I think you need to look at, forget the politics, which a lot of times we can't do for whatever reasons. But I think you need to look at what's fair to the people, what's fair to the people that run for office to represent those people, and go from there. And I don't think if you go here and start with a -5, it's going to really impact anything east of here as far as political sway, let's put it that way. And my friends, welcome. Come back again when you can spend some more time in a more leisurely manner.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we'll hear from Peter Perrini.
Good evening. My name's Peter Perrini. I live in the city of Hagerstown, and it's not fair that I have to follow Senator Edwards. But anyway, Speaker Jones, President Ferguson, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much for making the trip to Western Maryland. And we always appreciate seeing our elected leaders in Western Maryland. I would like to speak on both the congressional and the legislative districts this evening, and I'll try to be very brief. On the congressional district, you know, for those of us who kind of follow this stuff and have for a long time, there have been changes to this district that we're sitting in right now or standing in right now, and over the various different decennial redistricting. But the district as it exists today is not unprecedented. It's a district that is similar to the Potomac district, if you will, that had occurred over many decades, actually centuries, back to the 1870s. So there are some who here in Western Maryland believe that because we had a district for 20 years, it should always stay that way. But I think if you look back at the history over the length of the history of the district, you'll see that there's definitely precedent. And I'm not a map drawing expert, as Mr. Arrow is, but I will say that it looks to me that the current district, and I know the only thing that's for certain is that things are going to change, but the current congressional district is actually appears to be more compact than it was for the previous one that was there for 20 years. So I do feel like there's an argument out there that, you know, about representing, and there's an argument about it's always been that way, and I'm saying here today, it hasn't always been that way. It's been very similar to what's now the Potomac district. And those are my comments on the congressional district. On the legislative side, you know, you have the double effort of fitting, you know, delegate seats inside Senate seats. Again, as we've heard, and Senator Edwards said, you know, we know that the two westernmost counties have shrunk, and so the line can't go north into Pennsylvania. It can't go south across the Potomac, so it's got to go east. I live in Washington County. We know that District 1 is going to go further into Washington County. The question is where. And as you're considering that for the Senate districts, I would strongly consider that you look at following contiguous areas regardless of county lines. And I think that was mentioned in the opening remarks that because of the population changes, you know, these districts are no longer going to be able to be contained, you know, by county line. I think that there's opportunities to transcend the Washington County, Frederick County line for the Senate districts as you're considering those. And so I would encourage you, when you're looking at those districts, to not just think of 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4, but think of districts 1, 2, 3, and 4 comprehensively. On the legislative side, I'll just make a simple comment, and it kind of echoes something that Senator Edwards just said about people having officials that represent them. I believe that the decision years ago to make a single-member district, which effectively is the same as the city of Hagerstown, was a good decision, an appropriate decision, and I would encourage this commission to keep that intact, even though Hagerstown has grown in numbers and geographically through annexation. I believe that the opportunity there is to maintain a single-member district for Hagerstown. And then last thought, in the last 20 seconds, is as you're thinking about these districts, as you're going from west to east, I would encourage you to think of this in two ways. One, please think about it as an I-70 corridor, Interstate 70 that connects Hagerstown and Frederick. and also an I-270 corridor that comes out of Frederick down into Montgomery County. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. My time is up. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next we'll hear from Jeannie Massey of League of Women Voters.
Good evening. My name is Jeannie Massey, and I speak to you as a board member of the League of Women Voters of Washington County. We appreciate your effort to come out here to Western Maryland tonight, and I want to tell you that I've lived in Washington County for 2 decades, but as much as I know that my neighbors have really deep roots in farms and community organizations and churches, I'm pretty sure that they're not going to forget my reputation as a newcomer to town until I learn to love Old Bay and the Maryland flag. I'm working on it. I'm also a board member of the League of Women Voters of Maryland, and I want to share with you today that I believe in the League's mission to empower voters and defend democracy. I joined the League because I believe in the ability of communities to affect change. I'm a social studies teacher. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a granddaughter, although my grandparents have left us. But as a social studies teacher, I've spent my career talking about the Mayflower Compact and the Declaration of Independence, and the ability of people, groups, communities to make change happen, to improve the lives of their children and grandchildren. Unfortunately, I've seen the polarization of this country make that more and more difficult. And I believe that the efforts of redistricting in Maryland have made that harder, especially in Western Maryland. The effects of gerrymandering in 2011 have made it harder for those in Western Maryland to look at anyone in Annapolis with trust. When the Supreme Court threw the question of partisan redistricting back to the states in Rucho versus Common Cause, it left us with an opportunity to correct past mistakes. With the 24-hour news cycle, it leads many to believe that national politics is the only game in town. But I hope that we can remember that it's more than that. All politics is local. Trust is built one conversation at a time. This leads me to my most important ask. Incorporate community voices. In the map drawing process, include community members who have a say in the process. Consider publicly drawn maps in the process and pay attention to maps drawn by community groups. Provide numerous opportunities for substantive feedback before adopting maps. These maps will govern our political lives for the next decade, perhaps more. Community members, especially those in the minority, who live so far from the centers of power, as the senators and the delegates and Mr. Perrini have mentioned, it's hard to see yourself as part of the political process when it takes you hours to get to any meeting, and it's hard to find parking. Washington County and the whole Western Maryland region have so much potential, but we have significant economic turmoil and public health issues. We acknowledge them, but it's going to take trust between community members, local organizations, local government, state government, national government, for those problems to ease. Engaging the diverse communities of Maryland directly and transparently can do much to rebuild the community of trust that we need to safeguard. We need to safeguard it for the democratic process that we hope our children will inherit. In closing, the League of Women Voters of Washington County, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Maryland, we hope that this commission will continue in a transparent process and will build representation through a community process that will empower the voters across Maryland. Thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Finally, we have Brian Grimm. Is Brian Grimm here?
Madam Speaker, Mr. President, honorable commission members, thank you for taking the time to convene this hearing to consider what is a significant matter rooted in the most recent results of the census. My name is Brian Grimm, former mayor of the city of Cumberland and concerned citizen of the state of Maryland. My comments are relative to the congressional redistricting consideration before you, and while I cannot give you specific guidance as to where lines should be drawn, please hear me out on the history of this congressional district and what should be on your mind when you look at the congressional map when considering any changes. Prior to the redistricting that occurred following the 2010 census, the 6th congressional district was found to be the 9th least compacted congressional district in the United States. It stretched nearly the entire map of Maryland, from the western border of Garrett County far east into Hartford County, following the Pennsylvania line. The district was enormous and lacked compaction. There was no sense of neighborhood in a district so large and so stretched across our state. It was a poorly drawn district at the time. When redrawn, it was made into a district of firm historic grounding, compacted geographically with Western Maryland together with our neighbors to the east in Montgomery County. Historically, the lines had been similar. Until 1966, Montgomery County was included with the Western Maryland counties of Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington. Into the 1970s, portions of Montgomery County were included in the district, even in 1980, they were again redrawn with Western and Northern Montgomery County included in the district. When redrawn most recently in 2011 to be the district that it is today, it was created as a more compacted, neighborly, and cohesive district than what was created in the early 2000s across the north of Maryland. In Western Maryland, we see the value of the Potomac River, reaching from our community onto our nation's capital. Cumberland, once the Queen City, the 2nd largest city in Maryland, the 2nd largest city in the Appalachian Mountains, and simultaneously the 2nd largest city on the Potomac, recognizes that the river creates a natural boundary for this congressional district that reaches into Montgomery County, running alongside the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. While the currently drawn district is not a perfect geometric shape, I think we can recognize that, it is compacted and creates an appropriate connection between the neighbors of Western Maryland and those closer to our state and nation's capital. We must recognize that Maryland's shape is also a little bit unusual, and populations are consolidated into a geographic center of our state. Proportional representation demands that the district be created to guarantee the constitutional right of equal weight of votes, and that's why it's important to continue to have a 6th district similar to what we have today, achieving appropriate compaction of a district, bonding together people of closer geography than anything that might have taken us back to the early 2000s. Maintaining a compacted 6th district today, similar to what is today, is necessary to guaranteeing the people of Western Maryland their constitutional rights. Thank you again for your time and consideration, and thank you for taking on this tremendous responsibility.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else who hasn't signed up wish to speak to us? Now would be the time. Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming. Also want to point out that we will accept anything you wish to send us. You can post it on Twitter at MD_LRAC. I believe it can be emailed too. I believe the email address is redistricting@mlis.state.md.us. And of course, snail mail works too. So however you want to do it, we look forward to seeing whatever your ideas are. This is what we're here to do, is listen and observe and see what we can do with this. So thank you very much.